Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. Get ready for your third trip back to 1994. Let's do it.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the Crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this is our third trip into 1994. We did September, November, I believe, of 94 before. This time we're going to April. And I know I always struggle with the math of what grade I was in and how old I was because of the weird, the whole thing. My birthday is the last day of the year. Yeah, I don't even know when my own birthday is. We're off to a good start. My birthday is 2 days before Christmas. I promise I'm not an illegal alien making up a birthday. A lot going on. Anyway, I was 10 years old at this time and in the 4th grade, and I'll get into some of the stories about my 4th grade teacher. Anyway, bonus episode we're planning on for Christmas I talked about a couple weeks ago. Hopefully filming it this week. It's about me and my wife's Christmas memories. If you know my wife, she's going to pop in a couple times in this video to give her thoughts on a couple things that I'm not familiar with, but she has more experience with it, so I figured I'd get her thoughts on it. Anyway, that bonus episode, like I said, plan on filming it this week. Anyway, it should be out on my birthday on the 23rd. Because I'll get into why 23rd and Christmas, besides being 2 days apart, are kind of synonymous here. But a couple notes. Usually the podcasts come out. Luckily, I've been able to hit all my due dates. I haven't missed one yet. They've always come out on Wednesday. Well, looking at the calendar, Wednesday is Christmas Day, and Wednesday is also New Year's Day. And a lot of people with families and have plans. And I mean, I don't know whether you sit down and watch this or not. You hear my dog growling. Quit! It's kind of a podcast that's meant to be, you can listen to it. Because a lot of people put on podcasts and do other things. That's why it's a podcast, not a video where you got to really see what's going on. Unlike but the only one I did like that was my wrestling one where I had to show clips and highlights. Because I guess that technically wasn't a podcast. I don't even know what this is, but I call it that. Everybody's doing a podcast these days. But I hope you've been enjoying. I got some feedback last couple weeks because of last week's episode I talked about Mount Carmel and Ohio, like almost nobody knows about it. This person had commented on YouTube. By the way, you can catch me if you're wherever you're watching at. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, and the audio version on Spotify. But yeah, they were saying that nobody ever mentions Mount Carmel. It's one of those little towns. It's in Claremont County, so it's not technically Cincinnati. But it's one of those little towns that you don't really know about. I've lived all over different parts of Ohio. Obviously, Cincinnati, I've lived in Price Hill. It's where I was basically born at and lived at when I was young, and probably lived most of my life in Norwood. I've lived in Madeira. I've lived in Mount Carmel, like I said. Lived in Newtown, Ohio. There's probably other ones I don't even remember, or I'm just forgetting. But yeah, just thanks for your feedback and stuff. Definitely shout out to all those towns that don't get mentioned. And we're going to go right into it because I got a lot to talk about. Got a pretty fun one this week. Going to be talking about TV at first. Some notable events that went on at this time for TV. I'm going to drink a Mountain Dew here. Got Code Red today. But some notable events that went on. The channel Turner Classic Movies debuted in April of '94. And it was obviously owned by Ted Turner. It was to celebrate, I think, the 100th anniversary of the first movie shown in New York. But it has classic movies on it. I believe it's still going today. I used to watch, especially during Halloween, like the really classic, the Universal type movies from the 50s. The I Was a Teenage Werewolf, the old Creature from the Black Lagoon, all those. And then The Simpsons aired their 100th episode at this time. And of course now they're at episode 775, so it won't be too much longer before we're talking about the 1000th episode, as long as they keep going. Talk a little bit about The Simpsons, how it was that with Married with Children, kind of what got Fox off the ground, and really Fox has everything to owe to those two shows getting their ratings going. But we had a couple debuts around this time. One was actually will be in the CGI. Yeah, I'm gonna CGI me on this because I can't talk today. Gonna be down TGIF lineup later on. I'm gonna talk about it here because it debuted, and that's Sister Sister. And I don't know much about this show, so I'm gonna throw it to my wife.
The plot of Sister Sister is basically these two teenagers who go to the same store, and the parents don't know because they were both adopted. They were separated at birth and adopted by separate people.
They were twins, right?
Yeah.
So I thought.
And they come back together, and they end up moving in together because they want the sisters to have as much time together as possible to really become sisters. And the parents didn't get along at all. He was uptight, and she was very fly by the seat of her pants. But they end up falling in love.
And did you get to watch this when it was on, or?
Oh no, I watched reruns. But they did go on to do Twitches and Twitches 2, which I really liked.
Was it just the same actors, or was it
Yes,
was it part of the show?
No, it's the same actors, Tia and Tamara. And like I said, they also did Twitches and Twitches 2, which I really liked. Basically, those were two teenage witches.
Yes, that's a little bit about Sister Sister. Like I said, usually I gloss it over. Most I knew about it was they were twin sisters, and I may have seen a couple episodes. But one I've seen a bunch of, and well, until like the late 90s, early 2000s, I stopped watching Nickelodeon, was All That. Talked about that a little bit before. It's a sketch comedy show, kind of like Mad TV or Saturday Night Live. Everybody knows my disgust with that annoying show that I never found funny, outside a few Chris Farley things and Adam Sandler. But anyway, I always get off on that tangent when I talk about All That. But it was like a kids sketch variety show, and I mean, we've all seen the stuff that's the documentary, I can't remember the name of it right now, but about the idiot behind that. And when I try to look back at things, I don't, I can separate it. Just like if there's an actor that's like a murderer or something, I can usually separate it and be able to watch the movies without thinking about it. But I know for some people they can't. But for me, when I think about All That, I don't think about the idiot creator that should have been arrested, by the way. Just gets by with everything he did. But anyway, I think about, of course, Kenan and Kel. Just some of the classic stuff they had. Like when Kenan, I can't remember what the character was, but he was French, he was in the tub, and they had the thing with throwing chocolate all over everything, like Thanksgiving dinner, and where Kenan and Kel came from, Good Burger, just so many funny moments on that show. Like I said, I stopped watching Nickelodeon around 99, 2000. It just got too bleh for me. I won't even go into SpongeBob because a lot of you like it, and you'll probably turn this podcast off, so I ain't gonna say nothing. But I tried to change up what I talk about. The last couple weeks I've been talking about the primetime lineups. This time I want to talk about some game shows that were still going in 94 or starting. Show is Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Now this is on PBS. If you don't remember, or if you don't watch local TV, I don't know how you can't remember. PBS is the public broadcasting system. They're publicly funded. They always had those telethons on. They'd show like the live Barney. They'd be like, we make content for viewers like... Content, they didn't call it that then. But we make shows for viewers like you. Please send us your money and we'll give you this Barney tape and all this other stuff. But some of my favorite shows came from PBS, like Ghost Rider. I love that show. But Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego is based on the computer video games, and it had these 3 kids as contestants, and they got to try to find where Carmen Sandiego is, and like all the bad guys that are on there. Supermarket Sweep. Now, that's a classic one. When I was researching it, I was actually surprised to learn it was actually came out in the 60s. I remember the one from the 80s and the early 90s. It was on Lifetime Channel. And I said last week I was talking about the Turtles concert that the little whiny reporter at intermission during the Turtles concert reminded me of the Supermarket Sweep guy. It actually was him. I thought so, but I wasn't sure. Now I have proof. But yeah, Supermarket Sweep. They came out with a remake of it recently. Sucked, of course. The host was so unbearably unlikable that you couldn't even get into the... I don't even remember anything about if it was like the same as the original. I mean, obviously inflation, they've changed prices and stuff, and stores have changed how they look. But anyway, you'd have these teams, and they got to go find like different stuff in the store, and they got to answer questions, and at the end they get to go on the I think it's 2 minutes where they just grab as much stuff as they can and try to get it over a certain dollar amount, and there'd be like secret items that they have to find. Love that show. American Gladiators, of course. I mean, classic there. This is just one of my favorite things to watch ever. You'd have if you don't know what American Gladiators is, you had the Gladiators, which were who the contestants. There was 3 contestants, by the way, and was there? I can't remember. Was there 3 men and 3 women? Yeah, I think there was. Obviously, the men and the women had their own. Yeah, there was women gladiators. I'm trying to remember this stuff. It's been forever since I've seen it. But yeah, the 3 male contestants and then 3 female contestants would all each take turns doing the obstacles they had. They had to, like, some of them you'd have to take and just run a football to like the end of the end zone, or put a ball in like this, like, not a hoop, but the thing that goes in. And then there was one where you got to climb up this giant tower, and there'd be gladiators trying to throw you off to stop you. The gladiators were basically like the protectors of it. The contestants were the ones fighting, and then there'd be a tournament, like the end of the season, they'd have one ultimate gladiator. But man, that was fun. And then the final one, like the big giant obstacle course, they came out with a remake of this with Hogan hosting in the 2000s. It sucked, but the original definitely the best. One that probably a lot of you don't know unless you're from the Cincinnati area is Cash Explosion Double Play. It's been on WCPO, which is ABC affiliate. I believe at one time when in the 90s they were CBS, and them and WKRC flopped. A lot of you don't know what I'm talking about if you're not from the Cincinnati area, but Cash Explosion Double Play was there's lottery tickets in Ohio. They're Cash Explosion tickets. Sometimes you win money on them, but sometimes you would win. You get the 3 Cash Explosions. You'd win an entry, and on the back you fill out a thing and send it in, and they would do drawings on each show. And I can't remember how many it was then. I think it's 6 or 8 now. It's completely different these days. They don't even call it Cash Explosion anymore. They call it CE. Can't they just say the name? But this time it was Cash Explosion Double Play. But anyway, you get on there and you try to match these. You get turns and you flip over. I can't remember exactly at this time because they've changed the rules and stuff. I was watching it, but I've gotten to. It's hard to watch stuff because I don't have cable, and the antenna here don't work for crap. And if it did, it don't even get a Cincinnati channel. So it's kind of hard to keep up. I try to watch it on YouTube when I can. But it was a really fun show. It's basically just luck of the draw. You get lucky being on the show. You get lucky with the numbers that are behind the squares that you like turn over, or you touch the thing on the touch screen now. But it was you're a lot of game shows you'll watch, like Jeopardy, you'll play along with. Then there's some like that where it's just fun to watch, and I always root for the people that are from Cincinnati on there because it's for all Ohio. I should say that you wouldn't know this if you're out of Ohio. I forgot that they didn't show this just in Cincinnati. But in Cincinnati, it was WCPO. But just a fun one to watch. Like I said, all luck of the draw. No like skill or play along, but just a fun little way. It was always on Saturday nights. Still is. I think was it 7:30? I think it's on 7 or 7:30. Anyway, the last one I want to talk about is Nickelodeon Guts. That's kind of in the vein of American Gladiators, except the kids are competing against each other, not like against somebody defending it. There'd be obstacles, sports things that you have to do, and at the end, Mike O'Malley was the host, by the way. This is the original Nickelodeon Guts. They went on to have Global Guts, where they'd have kids from around the world, but the original was just whoever they had there at Nickelodeon Studios from America. But at the end, you climb up the giant rock, the giant mountain, and there'd be obstacles. There'd be stuff falling on you. You'd be racing with the other kids. And depending on the time period, there was one time when they all started out together, and I think near the beginning, because you would get points throughout the show, first, second, and third. And originally, when you went to the final challenge, the giant rock, the giant mountain, I should say, the crag, the aggro crag as they called it, everybody would start at the same time, and when you get to the top, whoever finished, then they would calculate, first, second, and third get different points, but they'd have to calculate that with the other scores, and it was kind of a mess. So they eventually went back, and first, second, and third all had different starting points. First obviously gets to start before the others to make it kind of even, so that way whoever got to the top was the winner. There was no calculating points or anything. So they improved that. But yeah, I miss Nickelodeon Guts so much. Like I said, kind of in the vein of American Gladiators. If you were a kid during the 90s, you were always watching this on Nickelodeon. And you're watching American Gladiators too. I mean, I don't think... It wasn't really marketed for adults specifically. It was kind of just for everybody. But Nickelodeon Guts is definitely marketed for kids, and it had kids on it. I mean, it's the Nickelodeon. The Nickelodeon logo or slogan was the network for kids by kids. Speaking of kids always play video games. I gotta work on my transitions. But during this time of video games, it was an exciting time period because the PlayStation 1 would come out later that year in Japan, and then I think, next year they would come out and really get started the next generation of consoles. But Nickelodeon was... Yes, Nickelodeon has their own console. Did you not remember? What was it, the Slime 64? Nintendo. Too many... I don't... Anyway, Nintendo was had the secret project for their next thing because the Super Nintendo had been out for a while. It was called Project Reality, and around this time, they renamed it to Ultra 64, and they revealed the design of it. Of course, that would become the Nintendo 64, which would be released about 2.5 years later. Another thing around this time was the controversy around violent video games, of course. It reminds me of the hearings they had in the 50s about the comic books that got Tales from the Crypt banned because, it's causing juvenile delinquency. The video games are going to cause people to murder people. The CDs, thanks to, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Al Gore's wife started all that crap about, these rap lyrics are going to cause kids to go out and kill people. And so I had to start putting parental warning on it. Well, the ESRB was founded. It was called something else at this time, but, the video game ratings, the rated T for teen and all that stuff. All that because people were worried about, I guess it's a good thing, so parents know. But I still say that a video game, a movie, a song has never caused anybody to kill or hurt anybody. And oh no, I said the K word, I'm going to get unmonetized. I'm not even monetized. But yeah, and that's another subject. But I say that none of that's caused anything. If somebody's done, hurt somebody because a song talked about it or a video game or a movie, it's because they already had the ideas in their head. There's already something wrong with their head, or something going on with them. A perfectly normal person is not going to play Grand Theft Auto and then want to go out and get a weapon and go after people because the video game, it was so fun in the video game. And if they did, it's because they got mental problems, and their kids shouldn't be, or their parents shouldn't be letting them play the games if they know they got mental problems. But anyway, sorry about all that ranting. I knew I was going to have to talk about that when I talked about the ESRB. Again, if you don't know what that is, it's just the little ratings on the video games that people just basically ignore these days. Heck, most of the time people don't even buy physical copies of games, so they don't even notice them on the PlayStation Network or Xbox or the Switch or whatever you play in these days. I got a PS4. I'm probably not going to get a PS5 until a PS6 comes out, if even then. But anyway, the one notable game that was released in April for Super Nintendo was Final Fantasy VI. Obviously not my type of game. For a little bit about Final Fantasy series, I'm going to throw it to my wife again.
Now, Final Fantasy VI I didn't play, but I did play Final Fantasy VII, and that was real fun. But that damn maze was so hard. But then they came out with the later ones, which were easier. And the remake, I love the remake. It's so much better than the original. People are going to hate me for that, but I like it better.
We don't say that here on the podcast. Nothing new can be better than originals.
It is.
You're ruining my whole thing.
Sorry.
She said she played Final Fantasy VII. That I think Final Fantasy VII was like one of the biggest ones of the series. It's the one I always remember hearing is Final Fantasy VII. Like I said, not a genre I play a lot. You know, my stuff is boring to a lot of people. Just sports, basically. I'm more likely to play Uno than Call of Duty, because anytime I ever, not to go off on another thing, but I've tried to play Call of Duty and those kind of games, I end up just shooting my own teammates and not knowing what I'm doing, and end up getting shot in the back because I can't figure out where I'm going. I might have liked it if I could do it, but I sucked at it. But I'm going to try not to transition here, but we're going to talk about wrestling. A lot of these I've done, the WWF hasn't had a pay-per-view, like the last three, I think. The WWF hasn't had a pay-per-view in the month. Of course, this is the month of April, and WCW had their Spring Stampede, the first one ever. It was April 17th from Chicago, and funny story before I talked about some of the stuff that happened there. I borrowed a tape from a friend of Spring Stampede. I don't remember when this was. It might have been the same year. Obviously, it wasn't the same month. Back then, the tapes would come out, 3 or 4 months after the events. Anyway, I borrowed the tape from my friend, and because the way Marky Foe was, you couldn't even have friends. You couldn't. I was afraid if I brought the tape into the house that... Actually, I didn't borrow it. I think I traded him for something because I didn't have to give it back. Because anyway, my whole point was I hid it in the bushes by the secretary. I told him the story of the last one where I was taking the wrestling magazines from the store. I stole them. And the secretary's like, you live 4 houses from me. So anyway, I had this tape. I brought it home and hid it in the bush. I was going to sneak it in at night. I think he was home from work or something. And he'd always go through the book bags, obsessively. Well, maybe part of it is my fault for stealing the wrestling magazines. And the fact that I probably had stuff that he was supposed to sign that I was hiding. But anyway, I hid it in the freaking bushes and went back to get it later on that night, and it was gone. I was so mad. I was like, I had Spring Stampede, I didn't even get to watch it. A funny story about that is... Oh, I know what it was. I know what I traded for that. His dad gave us this bookshelf with all these encyclopedias. Encyclopedias were Wikipedia nowadays. You had to get the books, and of course you had to update them when news changed. But anyway, inside one of these encyclopedias, because we used to have to write stuff, and when we get in trouble, we'd have to, instead of writing the dictionary, we had to write out those many pages of the That's when we weren't being made to stand in the corner with our nose in the corner and other things. I'll get into that in another one. But inside this encyclopedia, I found, because his dad worked at Napa, the auto parts store, and if you remember some of the auto parts calendars from the old days, the 90s and before, it was a bunch of naked women, and of course I enjoyed that. But I ended up trading, so I took it to school. I don't know how I didn't get in trouble for that one. I ended up trading somebody that for the Spring Stampede, because of course a lot of people traded wrestling tapes in those days. Apparently I'm just trading naked calendars for tapes, and I don't even get to watch it. Anyway, that's my story about that. This is a very famous event, besides being the first Spring Stampede. Go from naked calendars to talking about the Nasty Boys. What a difference there. Anyway, this famous match, the Nasty Boys beat Cactus Jack and Max Payne in the Chicago street fight. I have a Mick Foley DVD. It's one of the matches he talks really highly of on there. Also, Sting beat Rick Rude for the WCW International World Heavyweight title. When last we spoke, I was talking about WCW had the WCW World title. This was, when was this? Last one I did was February '92. WCW had the world title, and then the NWA world title still. Well, they eventually renamed it, because obviously, like I said, it was confusing. They eventually named, once the NWA was gone from WCW, no affiliation, they renamed that one the WCW International World Heavyweight title. And it was still the big gold belt that we all know as the classic world title. Unless you're there's two people, there are two sides. It's their favorite world titles, either the Winged Eagle, which is a three sides. That's the WWF. Or if you're talking WCW, NWA, it's either the big gold belt or what was the one they called the 10 pounds of gold, the Globe Dome, I think they call it. That classic NWA title you always see from the 70s and 80s before the big gold belt. But anyway, later on, like I said, Sting won this from Rick Rude. Later on, he would go on to face Ric Flair, who had the world title, and it was a unification match at Clash of the Champions. I think it was later in this year. And then Flair won, and then they used the big gold belt going forward, because, WCW world title that they had at that time has some fans, but I really didn't like it compared to that classic gold belt. Because that belt was something that Jim Crockett, who owned the company that WCW became when Turner bought him, something he brought in as the NWA world title. So when the NWA pulled out, they still had the physical that title, and NWA went back to using their classic title, and I believe they still use it today. The 10 pounds of gold, as they call it. But on this night, speaking of Flair, he fought Ricky Steamboat, and it ended in a double pin. Both men's shoulders were down, and later on they would go to hold up the title. It would be vacated, and then Flair ended up winning it back from Steamboat on WCW Saturday Night. Of course, this is like I've talked about before, this is the days before Nitro. Normally, you're like, WCW Saturday Night had a world title change? Well, that was their big show then. WCW Saturday Night was their huge show, and then, of course, they'd have pay-per-views at Clash of Champions. But a couple title changes that happened around this time. The ECW World Television Championship. Gary Wolf, who used to be known as Pitbull #1, defeated JT Smith at a live event for that title. And then a little bit about the WWF. Like I said, no pay-per-view, but Diesel beat Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental title on WWF Superstars, which they had Raw at this time, so that was kind of a big deal. Superstars was their syndicated weekend show. Was it syndicated or on USA Network? I think it was USA Network. I don't think it was syndicated. And then the Head Shrinkers defeated the Quebecers for the WWF World Tag Team titles on Raw. So that's a little bit about wrestling. And like I was talking about before, I want to talk about my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Weiss. Could not stand this woman. She reminded me, speaking of wrestling, she had this white, blonde, curly hair, and the way her face was, she looked like Harley Race. Her name was Mrs. Weiss, so I always called her Mrs. Actually, I used to call her Mrs. Lice and Mrs. Maggots, because her hair looked like maggots. Anyway, she looked like a cross between Harley Race and the fat kid from Bad Santa, which wasn't out then, or otherwise I would have been tormenting her, I guarantee, with, "Will we make you some sandwiches?" Speaking of tormenting, when I get back to talking about when I was in Mount Carmel, when I finally get to that episode, whenever it'll be, I will tell you how I tormented this poor bus driver, and they threw a party for me, little party, when I moved away. That's to come later. But I was so mean to this teacher, but she was so mean to everybody, especially me. And of course, every kid thinks that a teacher singles them out, so it may not have been that. But I think Josh can back me up, because he ended up having this teacher too, Mrs. Weiss. She was, man, I got in so much trouble in that class, and I swear half of it I deserved, but half of it was her just, she did not like me. But anyway, I wonder how long she ended up teaching there. She seems like the type of person I'd go back today and she'd still be there with the same hairstyle. Probably walk in and she would like instantly recognize me and tell me to get out. But anyway, we're going to talk about sports now. Of course, 94 was that stupid season that ended up being shortened by a strike. And I hadn't looked into it, but I didn't realize that the Reds were actually leading their division, so we could have done something in 94. We made the playoffs in 95, but I mean, we could have, who knows, we could have won the whole thing in 94, but we'll never know. They were leading at the end of this month. Let's see, I got down here who was leading. Yeah, the Reds and the Braves were leading the National League. And this was the first year I talked in the 1991 about just being a Western and a Eastern division in each National League and American League. This is the first year they came out with a 3-division format: the Central, the West, and the East. This is the first year that they came out with that, which of course they still use today. Obviously, they got stuff split up more, and like the Astros are now in the American League instead of, in our league they were in National League Central at this time. But the American League was led by the Red Sox and the Orioles, who were both I can't talk. I try to talk too fast. Both in the AL East. And like I said, who knows what could have happened that season. They got shortened by the strike. I didn't realize that kind of bummed me out when I read that the Reds were like a half a game ahead when the season ended in 94 because of the stupid strike. But also a first this year, the Indians, of course, they're now known as the Guardians, but this was their first year at Jacobs Field, and they were in what was known before the Mistake by the Lake, as they called it. I think it was Cleveland Municipal Stadium, I think. But yeah, this was their first, and Jacobs Field was like really innovative for its time. It was when they started to get back to baseball parks looking like ballparks and not, the utility. Here you can do all these sports, football, baseball, whatever, in one stadium. Because, as much as I love Riverfront Stadium, which the Reds were playing at this time, it was one of those cookie cutters, as they're known, stadiums. I mean, Great American Ballpark now, it looks like a baseball field. As much as I love Riverfront Stadium, it didn't really, you could have had anything going on at that field. But just the look of Jacobs Field really started what is known as the modern classic era, where they start looking like they used to in the beginning days of baseball, when it used to look like actual baseball fields. But a couple no-hitters thrown this month. Kent Mercker, the Braves, threw a no-hitter on April 8th, and Scott Erickson of the Twins threw one on April 27th. Of course, these days, you're lucky if you get 2 no-hitters a year, let alone in a month. And in NASCAR, Dale Earnhardt won. He went on to win his 3rd title that year, but this is still beginning months of NASCAR. He won the Bristol Food City 500. Terry Labonte won the first Union 400 from North Wilkesboro Speedway. I'm not sure if that one's still in use in NASCAR. And then Rusty Wallace won the Haynes 500 from Martinsville. I wonder if they gave him a free underwear for life for winning that. But again, it's April, not March, but the March Madness, usually the NCAA championship for basketball usually ends, the tournament usually ends in April. And Arkansas won their first ever championship by beating. Yeah, they bit them. Beating Duke. Anyway, I want to get into some more Marky Foe stories. Just a quick recap, if you don't know who Marky Foe is: stepdad, mean to us, stupid half the time, drunk half the time. Just a lot of a lot of bad memories, but a lot of funny memories. You know, I try to keep everything humorous here. I'm going to talk about some of the food we had to eat. I should say endure at this time. Oh, that reminds me. We didn't get pop then. The only pop in the house was his precious Dr. Pepper, which we had to sneak. So we would... You can ask Josh. I had a system. Because he could hear anything, it seemed. I would take the pop, I would take my shirt, and just barely open it to where you couldn't hear it open. And I would sit there and drink it by the basement steps, which were right there at the kitchen, for one specific reason. And that was because if I heard him coming, which you would hear, boom, 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 you could hear him coming from a mile away, I would take the last drink and throw it down the freaking basement steps. There was a ring on this basement wall. I don't know how he never realized, because we always clean up the can, but we didn't clean up the wall. Just a brown stain on this wall from us throwing the pop down there. I even forgot about that. And then he would always get a pie or something, and he'd have like a slice or 7 out of it, but there'd be some left, and I would take a little bit, and I would make it like so where it looks like a slice instead of just taking a bite out of it. But then I would eat more. It's like, oh, it's not even. By the time I'm done, half the thing's gone, and like, oh no, I'm gonna be in trouble. But half the time you don't even remember because he's drunk. He's like, oh, I must have just ate that when I was drunk. But the stuff he used to make. Oh my God, I've never seen someone more obsessed with mushrooms in my life than Marky Foe. He put them in everything. I don't even remember if I liked mushrooms before this, but since this, I know for a fact I can't stand them. I don't like to touch them. I don't like to smell them. Don't even like to look at them. But he made this stuff called slop, which, by the way, he also referred to his genitals as slop. He's like, oh, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to shake my slop. I was like, oh, what the hell? Sorry if anybody gets a mental picture on that. But he called his food slop, too. And it looked like slop and tasted like slop. It was these like, what noodles? Did he use shells? I think he might have, yeah, he used dry pasta shells. Spaghetti sauce, of course, with extra mushrooms. Shoved more mushrooms in it. Like cans and cans of mushrooms. And there it is. Put it all together. Slop. It was so disgusting. We couldn't stand it. We ended up coming with a system that we called the donation cup. What it was is, let me take for instance a Taco Bell cup. It was usually like a little tumbler that you drink stuff out of. So it was shorter than this. I wish we'd have one this big. We would keep it. That we had this table with like this like little platform underneath where we could hide it, and we would take the cup and we would start putting food, because we wouldn't be able to get up till our food was done. We start shoveling stuff in there, and this thing would be full, and we'd have to dump it out in the garbage when he wasn't looking. But yeah, the donation cup came in handy with slop. Another thing that my mom made that I didn't like, a lot of people liked, there was nothing wrong with the food, there wasn't 6 pounds of mushrooms, was, especially New Year's Day she had this, was pork roast and sauerkraut. Oh, I cannot stand sauerkraut. I think to this day is also the reason I don't like pork roast unless it's like, made into barbecue or something like that. Just like regular pork roast, like it gives me a flashback. I would and we'd have mashed potatoes with it too. I would cover that sauerkraut and so many mashed potatoes and literal huge spoonfuls of butter till I could just barely not taste it. I did not like sauerkraut. Sorry, Mom. Like, you didn't do anything wrong with the food. It was how it was supposed to taste. I just did not like it. But the one thing he made, which, depending on how much flour was on it, would sometimes be good, but usually wasn't, was lurch dogs. Now, he actually had a tattoo on his arm that said lurch. Although he said it said lurch, I swear this thing looked like it said lunch. It didn't say lurch, it said lunch. But they called him Lurch because he was so tall, from the Addams Family. But he made lurch dogs, which were basically pigs in a blanket, but they were full-size hot dogs that he wrapped in, not biscuits, bickets. He would wrap them in those, And then sometimes there'd be cheese, sometimes not. If it is, it's burnt. It was guaranteed burnt cheese, which to this day I do not like burnt cheese because of that. Cheeses either because they taste burnt. And then he would cover it in flour. And I don't just mean like, put a little flour on it so it does. I mean, it would be covered in flour. You couldn't see anything. It looked like it snowed on the freaking food. And he would cover it with more flour. And when he thought he was done, he'd put more flour on it. Then he'd put it in the oven for like almost an hour. And it'd come out this burnt, nasty, stinking mess. Somehow still powdery from flour. And it's like, I made lurch dogs, your guys' favorites. Like, oh, thank you. Josh, where's the donation cup? Luckily, Travis was still too young for some of this stuff. He didn't have to eat some of this stuff. Later on, he did for a little bit, but you got lucky, Travis. And Clint, you definitely got lucky. You were on baby food. I can imagine he took, like, I could just imagine Mom made him up some of that orange, weird-looking baby food meat stuff, and some fruit and some little green vegetables. You just imagine Mom heating it up in the microwave and him coming up. I ain't got enough flour on there. Oh, here's a couple mushrooms. Grin and bear it. Anyway, yeah, we did not have the best times. We're going to move on to some music now. Oh boy, the Billboard Hot 100, not his tape, but the Hot 100 countdown for that month was, the number one song the whole month was Bump and Grind by R. Kelly. The least I say about any of that, the better. I'm sure he's getting all that he can take in prison. We'll move to the American Country Countdown, my favorite music. Little Texas, My Love, was number one for 2 weeks. Man, that was a great song. They had such great harmonies. I wish they could have stayed together as a group. They had two main lead singers in it, and I think that was kind of the problem that led to them breaking up. But they were Brady Seals and Tim Rushlow. They were both so good, and their whole sound, no matter who was singing, you could tell it was Little Texas. Anyway, number one for 2 weeks also was Tracy Lawrence, If the Good Die Young. And Tracy Lawrence had some great songs, and this was kind of one of his more up-tempo ones. And it was just a really fun song. And then the last number one of the month was Faith Hill, Piece of My Heart. And, of course, that's more famously known as Janis Joplin's song. I've heard both. This is going to rub some people the wrong way. I really don't like Janis Joplin's style of singing. She just sounds like she screams too much. I know my sister Jody, if you're listening to this, you're probably going to disown me for that. But but I always preferred Faith Hill's version. This was back when Faith Hill was country, before she got popular, and it all seemed to go to her head, and all of a sudden she's a pop star, and you didn't hear much from her, and after the early 2000s, she just, her and Tim McGraw, of course they're married, and they both decided to go more pop than anything, and it really ended up, I didn't hurt Tim McGraw, but it hurt her long term. Of course, she went on to movies, so I doubt she cares when I say about her on a podcast. I just prefer her older stuff. But a couple album releases around this time. Kenny Chesney, In My Wildest Dreams. That was his debut album. Of course, he went on to become a huge superstar. I miss his earlier stuff. It was way more country. Once he started getting the island stuff, a few of the songs were good, but it was like, we don't need another Jimmy Buffett. We got a Jimmy Buffett. Sing good country music. But I still like a lot of it. Not anything newer. It all sounds like today's trash to me. Sorry. It's just my opinion. Reba McEntire, Read My Mind. Had some great songs on that. A lot of her mid to late 90s stuff goes kind of unrecognized compared to her early 90s and her 80s run. But it was still some really good stuff. And then Randy Travis, This Is Me. Great album. This was kind of when he was there was a period of time from 86 when he came out till the early 90s where Randy Travis was number one all the time. And this was '94 was kind of when he was winding that down. He wasn't as popular. Everybody goes through that. You know, unless you're George Strait, you see him somehow. Although today they won't even play him on the radio because, well, we got to see what song Jelly Roll is going to be on this week. I know that's a controversial one, but it seems like there's a song, and here comes Jelly Roll. He's like, ooh, how can I be involved in this one? Anyway, yeah, it seems like everybody has their run and kind of falls out. It really sucks because there's so much. They make so much good music still, but it don't get played, so people don't get to hear it. But we're going to move on to the news. Just a few things this week. Big news. Former president, disgraced as he was, Richard Nixon, had a stroke and died on April 22nd. By the way, April 23rd was my brother Josh's birthday. Let's see, in '94 he turned 6 this month. Just starting to school, soon to be stealing those Goosebump books. But I talked about Rodney King last week, how they started his civil suit then, and it was like over a year later he finally the case ended. He was awarded just under $4 million, which in my opinion wasn't enough for the abuse he had to take at the hands of the police. And the Supreme Court outlawed excluding. They should outlaw me talking because I can't talk. Outlawed excluding people from serving on juries based on their gender, because you know, back then when you do the defense and the prosecutor, they would go into these jury selection things, and you know, you try to pick a jury that's favorable for one way or the other. You know, if for instance you got a case where a guy's killing, I shouldn't say killing on here, I'm gonna get taken off, but I heard the stupidest thing the other day. I'm gonna say it now: unaliving somebody. And if it was like a woman or something, then obviously his lawyers wouldn't want many women on the jury because they might be sympathetic and not, you know, maybe not look at the facts, or maybe they would, but they don't want to, you know, he knows he did it and they don't want to get convicted. They did away with that, so that way you could have more of a diverse jury. I mean, I'm sure that they still did that, but they just couldn't say, oh, you're excluded because you're a woman, or you're excluded because you're a man. They probably, you know, because you get a certain amount of vetoes for the jury you can use. You're like, okay, I don't want this person. They just can't say it's because it's a man or a woman. There's always loopholes, but supposed to be you can't exclude people based on their gender. And yeah, that was pretty much it for the news. I know last week was some horrible stuff on the news. This week's not too much better. But we'll move on to movies, and I actually have both the movies I'm going to talk about behind me here. First off, we got Major League 2, which I have on DVD with Major League Back to the Minors. That's a fun movie too. And coincidentally this week I just picked up the first Major League finally. I had been looking for it everywhere. Found it at Goodwill. This I got from Walmart with them double features. But anyway, Major League 2 has a lot of the same characters. Charlie Sheen, Wesley Snipes. No, it wasn't Wesley Snipes. They replaced him, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think they replaced him, because I guess he was too big of a star in this. But yeah, Major League 2 kind of picks up where the other one went off. Charlie Sheen's now this, like, you know, he just gotten out of prison in the first movie, and, you know, Wild Thing, as he was known, the pitcher. And he was, like, in this one, he was getting all these commercial deals and wearing fancy suits and gave up his motorcycle. By the end, he got all that back because, you know, his pitching had gone to crap. But it's just following the team again. The woman that owned it, that was trying to make him lose at the beginning, the other one ended up buying it again. And just a lot of fun. The first one's always my favorite, but the second one's definitely close. And then I got my Leprechaun Blu-ray collection here, which I think does it have the remake in it? Yeah, the crappy freaking remake with Hornswoggle from WWE. I do not like. But anyways, the reason I got that there is because Leprechaun 2 also came out in April. And of course, if you've seen my top 50 horror podcast. It is in the top 10, I believe, because Leprechaun 2 is my all-time favorite Leprechaun. It's where he has to try to find a wife by making her sneeze 3 times. I mean, obviously it's ridiculous, but it's still my favorite one. Some of my favorite lines are in this movie. Some of the bad acting is funny. The guy that plays Morty, the old drunk guy, he's hilarious. Get it out! With the pot of gold in his stomach. They do the hearse tour, and they go by this woman's house. She's like, "We don't need none like you!" And it reminded me of Marky Fo when we were living. At this time, we might have been living in 5720 section. At the last podcast, it was 54, because we literally moved next door. But we might have been living at the first house when he got in a fight with this woman next door who looked exactly like the woman off Leprechaun 2. And it wasn't even an argument over anything major. And then just all of a sudden she pulls a shotgun on him. She's like, "You need to get out of here. We don't need it like you. Die!" Needless to say, none of us even looked towards her house after that. I don't even remember what it was for. I'm sure Marky Fo was in the wrong. I almost guarantee it. But yeah, that woman reminds me of that. And then just a lot of, like, Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun. You can tell he's having so much fun with this movie. He gets on his little go-kart and spray painted "Me Want Me Gold." And it has the little black guy from Bad Santa at one point going to the bathroom. "Yo, want me gold?" Anyway, Tales from the Crypt, we'll move on now, was in season 5. It ended. I want to talk about my favorite episode from that season. It was called "Oil's Well That Ends Well." It was about a con artist and his girlfriend that they extort people. They tell them, "Oh, there's this oil well here. I'm going to need money for this. I need to get permits and everything else," and they end up scamming out of the money. Well, a bunch of double crossing happens, and one of the townsmen that they got in on this, or no, it wasn't. It was one of their former partners, was actually played by John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And there's at one point in the show where he laughs, like the character, the guy laughs, and is like, if you didn't know that was a Crypt Keeper, when you heard the laugh, it's like, "Hey, that laugh sounds familiar." And then at the end, the Crypt Keeper's watching it back on TV. He's like, "One of these actors looks very familiar." And he keeps playing the scene where he's laughing. Also, the Crypt Keeper was playing the pinball machine in season 1 that I got to play at Lieb's Bar. Back when Marky Fo took us to the bars. There's just a little bit about Tales from the Crypt. Again, it was off season, so I just want to talk about my favorite episode of that season. Season 1 of Tales from the Crypt Keeper had wrapped to the cartoon. I like the second and third seasons better when they brought in the old witch and the Vault Keeper from the comic books, just messing with Crippy, as they called him. But yeah, and that was still before the game show came out. But I'm gonna move into probably one of my favorite segments to do on here is the Nickelodeon lineup. Sometimes I alternate whether I do Nickelodeon or Saturday morning cartoons. I did Saturday morning cartoons last week. This week I'm going to do Sunday's Nickelodeon lineup in April. And it was kind of a bittersweet one because the only time around this time we'd be able to watch Nickelodeon is when we went to Granny's house. And because, Granny's house was definitely our escape from Marky Fo and school and everything else. Inevitably one of us would get to spend the weekend over there, or sometimes in the summer multiple weeks. But if it was during the week, we'd be over there and we'd have to go home Sunday sometime around 4 or 5, and it was just like, and when it was me, or sometimes it was me and Josh together, but we dreaded it so much. Like we get up, we go over there Friday after school, in the evening, like, yes, we got the whole weekend. Saturday morning, wake up, watch TV, go outside and play, explore the woods back there. So much fun, the whole day was, and then we go to bed, and then we wake up Sunday morning, it's like, oh no, we got to leave today, and try to have fun during the day, but then it'd be time for Mom to come and get us. I was like, oh, we got to go back to him. Sorry, I know I said I was going to try to keep it funny here, but it really was. It was like, I want to stay here with Granny. You know, but Mom had to come and get us. I mean, we had school, so we couldn't just stay there before I started skipping school. But, so I didn't get to watch, the evening portion of this a lot. But just want to kind of get into that. Sorry for the depressing thing there, but it was like we did not want to go back. And even I think if things would have been good, we wouldn't have wanted to leave, because I mean, Granny she'd make us these square pizzas they're not square pizzas. I'm thinking of the lunch pizzas. These little circular pizzas. She would always get a bunch of the little tiny frozen pizzas. Or she would make us homemade French fries, cut up the potatoes and fry them in the cast iron skillet. I mean, I could go on for days. I want to save some for other podcasts, but we did not want to leave that place. Anyway, the Sunday morning lineup for Nickelodeon saw 6 a.m. The Little Bits. Never heard of it. And 6:30, Eureka's Castle. Talked about that last week. Loved that show. Dennis the Menace at 7. 7:30, Underdog. I haven't got to talk about that one on here. That was Josh's favorite. There's no need to fear. Underdog is here. And, obviously the dog flying around with the cape, and it was basically like Superman in dog form. And that was, I believe, where Rocky and Bullwinkle started, I think, on one of the shorts on that, until they got their own cartoon. But yeah, Underdog is... I didn't see the newer movies. It just didn't look like something I'd like. I just want to keep my memories of the good old cartoon. Of course, Underdog wasn't, 1994 came out. It came out, I think, the 60s or 70s, I believe. But Nickelodeon showed a lot of reruns that when we were kids, we just thought, oh, it's a new show. We love it. Danger Mouse was at 8. Never seen that. Cartoon Kablooey. I remember those. They had a bunch of shorts. Short cartoons and different stuff like that. It was kind of just like a hodgepodge of different, whatever they could fit in there. It was basically, here kids, watch all this stuff while we go do some important stuff. Next, Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Good thing it's just Looney Tunes. 10 a.m. Doug. 10:30 Rugrats. 11 Ren and Stimpy. 11:30 Rocko's Modern Life. 4 classic Nicktoons right there. Again, I don't look at this list ahead of time. I kind of like to be surprised. Yeah, but I've talked about all those before. I guarantee you, I was up eating cereal at this time, or Granny made some good breakfast, like she always did, and we were, either me and Josh were camped out in front of the TV watching these. And then at noon, Clarissa Explains It All. Talked about that a couple weeks ago. Melissa Joan Hart, of course. The Adventures of Pete and Pete. I've talked about that before. I didn't really care for the show. The Tomorrow People. I don't remember that. Welcome Freshmen. I remember that, but it's not one of my favorites. I never really watched it. Wienerville. This is Josh's favorite. There's a show called Wienerville, made by Mark Wiener. And as kids, of course, we're going to make the innuendos and the jokes. But there was this one puppet Josh loved in particular named Boney. If you're watching, I'll put a picture of him on the screen. The puppet's name was Boney. And he would always sing, but yeah, Wienerville, and the theme song gets stuck in here. Wienerville, Wienerville. Oh, how they got away with, even though the guy's name was Wiener, how they got away with the show called Wienerville, I'll never know. Oh, and 4 o'clock, Nick Arcade. Then we start the game show part of it. Nick Arcade, loved that game show. With all the arcade games and going into the video game. And then 4:30, Family Double Dare. One of the Double Dare I remember the most was the family ones. You'd have the mom and dad and the brother and sister, or the 2 brothers, 2 sisters, however the family was made up. But that was the Double Dare I remember the most. Nickelodeon Wild Side Show. I don't remember that one. And then Rocko's Modern Life again. Adventures of Pete and Pete again. Nickelodeon Guts, which I talked about earlier, was on at this time. And then 7, they had a replay of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Oh, I love that show. Of course, it was probably the replay from the night before of Snick. Snick was built on that, and then later all that and Kenan and Kel. But Snick basically built its reputation around Are You Afraid of the Dark? The creepy clown in the intro, and the song always gets you. And then they sit around the campfire telling, one of them's gonna, they throw the stuff into the fire that makes it flare up all these colors, and then they tell the story, and at the end, they wrap up the story and then put the fire out. It's basically a Tales from the Crypt for the kids, basically. And Roundhouse, I don't remember that. And then Nick News, which of course back then I never watched that stuff. And then Nick at Night started at 8:30. Like I said, I was usually gone by then, unless it was the summer. And then we got to stay, however long we were allowed to stay. But that's a little bit of Nickelodeon. The TGIF lineup at the time, this was like prime TGIF time period. Family Matters was in this 5th season. Of course, Family Matters was one of the, like I just said about Are You Afraid of the Dark, basically building Snick. Family Matters basically, it wasn't the first show on TGIF, but it was during, what really made it popular. They were in season 5. That's when they started really experimenting with the weirdness. It could have gone wrong, and it probably wasn't as good as the original first few seasons. But it was the one where Stefan makes his appearance, where Urkel's messing around with the machine and makes the cool version of him that Laura falls in love with. I could have went really wrong. Like when it started going more science fiction stuff, they could have turned off some. I think it did a little bit. But it was still so popular that people were watching just to see what Urkel would do. It's a good thing they didn't keep Stefan permanently on the show in place of Urkel, because I think then the fans would have stopped watching. Because Urkel, he wasn't the original focus of that show, but when he became the focus, that's when it started becoming number one. Boy Meets World first season was on at this time, just wrapping up. Of course, their first season, they're still in elementary school. They got Minkus on there still. They introduced Topanga. She's just a weird kid that Corey has no interest in. Later on, they make it seem like they've always loved each other, but clearly if you watch the first season, that's not the case. He might have started developing feelings for her during the season, but it wasn't obvious. Of course, Corey and Sean always up to trouble. And then they had other friends. There's a Boy Meets World podcast with the actors who played Sean, Topanga, and Eric. And I've started listening to that. It's a pretty fun podcast. They're talking about the first season, the one I'm watching. I don't know what they're up to now, if they're still continuing it. I'm so behind on doing all kinds of stuff and listening to all kinds of stuff. But yeah, Boy Meets World, that first season, definitely my favorite times of Boy Meets World was when they were in middle and high school. But the first season really set a good tone. Step by Step, the third show, TGIF, was in its 3rd season. And they were definitely getting a big following at this point. I've talked about them. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Sister started and in the spring, and it replaced Hanging with Mr. Cooper, which had their season ended early. I don't know exactly why. It wasn't canceled because they were on next season, but yeah, Sister was kind of a mid-season replacement for that, and we heard about that earlier. This episode either flew by or dragged on, depending on, I don't know. I kind of got off track of some of the Mark Markey Post stuff, but that's fun for me to talk about, as you can tell. Like I said, I always try to keep a balance between giving stuff that everybody can remember, talking about the TV and the music and the wrestling. And I mean, if you're not a wrestling fan, then you have to hear about wrestling every week. I'm sorry, but it's stuff I liked. If you don't like this stuff, or you have different opinions on this, make your own podcast. Tag me in the video. I'll subscribe and watch it. I'd love to hear about everybody's experience. But yeah, this one was a fun one to do, obviously. We're going to jump about 3 years ahead in the future next time. I would be 13 years old going into 7th grade, and we're going to talk about May 1997. Yeah, this is my first year of 7th grade, so I'll give some of those stories and of why it was just the first year of 7th grade. 7th grade part 1, we'll call it. But yeah, that's next week, and then like I said, bonus Christmas episode on my birthday, and then Christmas week and New Year's week, our episodes will be out on Thursday instead of Wednesday. so that way, more people have a chance to watch them. If you're watching or listening, thank you for supporting. This is fun to do, and hopefully I'll still find it fun to do and want to do this every week. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the Crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns.